For the first part of the experiment, you're going to add the sample and then 30 milliliters of the ether to the dry sample, and we want to mix that really well. So we want to add this mixture to a separatory funnel, and we're going to add 15 milliliters of 1.0 molar aqueous sodium hydroxide, and this is going to bubble and produce gas. So we're going to swirl the contents and periodically release the gas. After all the gas has been released, we're going to let it separate for a few seconds and then drain off the bottom. So we're going to repeat the same procedure as the first part and add another 30 milliliters of ether to the solution. And we're going to do the same thing, swirling and venting. The bottom contents are separated and then combined. Separated contents are then added to an ice bath and then slowly acidified with concentrated hydrochloric acid. Here you can see us testing of the pH strip. And we added it a little bit too quickly, but you're stirring it to mix the contents. Then we're going to heat and add a stir bean to mix. And we just added a bit of water to bring the volume up a little bit. We put a watch glass on top so it doesn't splatter. Basically, we're going to boil this until it's clear. We're going to move on to part 2 while part 1 is boiling away and do the same process as before, adding 15 milliliters of 1.0 molar dilute hydrochloric acid. And just as in part 1, we're going to swirl the contents, periodically venting. Then we're going to drain the bottom contents off into a little beaker. And we were having problems and realized we forgot to take the cap off, so don't forget to take the cap off, and it makes the draining a lot faster. So drain off the bottom contents. This process is repeated and the bottom contents are separated and combined. Don't forget to add a new beaker when removing it to catch drips. We're going to move the combined aqueous extracts to an ice bath and cool. So just checking back on part 1, we can see the solution is now clear and boiling. Looking at the separatory funnel, we had a beak underneath to capture any drops, and we're just going to drain off the rest of the ether solution into an Erlenmeyer for later. Here we are weighing out approximately 2 grams of solid sodium carbonate. And the solid sodium carbonate is going to be added to the cooled aqueous mixture. And this is the most exciting part because it is called carbon dioxide evolution. And we're very excited. It's fizzing. And if you could hear us talking, we're just very excited. So we had to wait for all of the contents to react, and this is just a sped up version of the bubbling. So we wanted to check the pH because it shouldn't have been acidic anymore, but we were thinking it was more of a neutral solution as nothing really changed. It went a little bit blue, but it wasn't exactly basic, so nothing really happened. We ended up being okay with the results. So according to the lab manual, these were supposed to be a yellow solid. We didn't really see the color yellow, but we got some beautiful crystals and we're ready to separate using the Hirsch funnel and vacuum filtration. We had to make sure to kill the suction first before turning off the water, as sometimes water will flow back into the tube. Here we are adding the 10 milliliter pump of methanol and ready to add to the steam bath. We place the contents in the steam bath and it's perfect because there's different rings for different sizes. So from the steam bath we've added water and we are boiling the crystals once again. And don't forget to add a watch glass to prevent any splatters. Once boiled, will be set aside to cool gradually. And we are moving on to part 3. The ether solution in the Erlenmeyer is dried using an anhydrous sodium sulfate. and we had to add a little bit of this at a time and then mix just to see how much it needed. We then decanted the solution to leave the clumps behind into a beaker and brought this beaker over to the steam bath. Moving back to part 2, we had gradually cooled the crystals first to room temperature and then in an ice bath, and we are transferring them to a suction filtration and using a bit of ice cold water. It is supposed to be ice cold 1:1 methanol water, however we just use water in this situation. The crystals were nice and dry and you're supposed to let them sit for a day. Okay, back to part 1. We are now transferring the crystals to a weigh boat. Part 1 is completely finished and we are using the melting point apparatus to determine melting point. Meanwhile, crystals from part 2 are still on the vacuum filtration because they need to be very dry. And we are once again demonstrating that you must kill the suction before turning off the water, as it can go back up the tube. So now we are admiring the beautiful crystals from the completed parts 1 and 2, and we ideally should be waiting a day before weighing and determining melting point. However, we just did it anyways as we didn't have a lot of time, and the weight also wasn't very accurate, as they should be completely dry before weighing. Returning to the final part 3, we have the dried clumps left over in the massive beaker, and we are adding the minimum amount of boiling methanol to the crude. Okay, I thought this part was really beautiful. You can see the crystals forming in real time as the solution cools gradually. A necessary dance break. Finally, we are here to filter the crystals and using some filter paper and gravity filtration. Here's a close-up of the melting point apparatus. You can just see a little bit under the magnifying glass. You want to use the tiniest amount possible, and you have to be very vigilant as it will go very quickly, and you have to monitor the temperature exactly, as you can see how quickly this melts from a solid to a liquid. Finally, the naphthalene crystals from part 3 are collected from suction filtration using a Hirsch funnel, and they are washed using around 2 milliliters of ice-cold methanol. There you have it. All of the crystals have been transferred to weigh boats, and the experiment is complete. The melting points were all determined, and these can be weighed once fully dried. Thanks so much for watching.